All right, this video is going to be broken up into 4 parts. I'm going to give you the bad news, then I'm going to give you the good news, then I'm going to give you some context on everything, and then I'm going to tell you what you can directly do. Okay? Cool. Okay, before we get into that, though, I have to establish a few things just so you know that I'm not huffing copium or whatever, all right? Some pundits are going to downplay whatever I say. I'm not. I've been looking this up for the last 2 days. Number one, probably one of the biggest fears people have right now outside of specific civil rights being eroded or violated in the wake of this election is the loss of political parties or voting or the right to vote or any sort of engagement in democracy similar to 1930s Germany. Also, they fear the suspension of the Constitution like Donald Trump has said in prior statements. And I've been looking this up since 10 a.m. 2 days ago, round the clock, and even with everything that is in Project 2025 and all of the guardrails it pushes, Trump does not have the votes or the state legislatures in control to suspend the Constitution and disable voting in mass. It is legally and structurally impossible for him to take away your right to vote or to grant himself unlimited terms and permanently defang the Democratic Party. In order to do all of that, he would need 38 compliant state legislatures, or about 3/4 of the state legislatures in this country. Republicans control 28. He is 10 shy. The others are Democratic or divided with slim majority/minorities. And just to clear up another fear, anybody who's seen other tweets from the Midas accounts, from the guy who posts all those clips from Midas, saying that a lot of Trump officials want to federalize elections, which is a fascist thing to do, there are significant, really serious structural roadblocks for Trump being able to do that, including some of his hand-picked Supreme Court. I will get to that in a second. Now, another fear that we have to take care of ahead of time is in terms of the military carrying out extrajudicial enemy within type attacks, being used as police in the streets with law enforcement overall in the country. First off, military control is decentralized. Okay? It's built that way. So if Trump replaces the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chiefs of Staffs and all the levers of the DOD with loyalists like Project 2025 wants him to do, the literal structure of the military and the UCMJ is built specifically to have levers to stop a president from using it on the citizenry. Now, after I wrote this paragraph that I'm reading right now, CNN released an article saying that the Pentagon was already having conversations about what would happen now that Trump has been elected for a second term, which is, by the way, what the military would do in order to set up roadblocks for him doing this. And those roadblocks will probably rely on the multiple levers that are built in as nonpartisan and not subject to his Schedule F executive order. Because again, some of those military personnel are not civilian employees. Now, most career military personnel have protections against politically motivated dismissals, and that can go challenged pretty effectively even within the Project 2025 framework. And in case you go, hey, what about the National Guard? What if he federalizes it? What about that instance during the George Floyd protests? Listen, even within federalization of the National Guard, the National Guard is under the control of states. Now, the DC National Guard is a little bit different, and there are loopholes Trump used in 2020 to be able to authorize things like Lafayette Square. But those had enormous ramifications for the National Guard itself, both political and personal. And what I'm trying to get to is that, listen, there will absolutely 100% be a midterm election in 2026 that has swingy states in a world with heavy anti-incumbency bias that may love the economy and gas prices, but is really fucking scared about abortion, and a non-defanged Democratic Party. Now, Trump can build issues within the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, and other significantly undemocratic norms to make voting harder or suppression easier. But there has been historically ways to subvert and overcome those effectively, but I will go over that in the context section. Trust me, I got you. But listen, overall, getting to effective single-party puppet government rule in the United States would be incredibly challenging due to decentralized elections and government. If Republicans controlled 38 legislatures and the majority of governorships and had no split houses in key swing states, and they controlled all of the lower courts. Maybe, but they don't. And Biden actually accelerated the judges he was confirming and installing to about 215. If he appoints 32 more before the terms end, he matches Trump's judiciary record, save for the Supreme Court. Do you remember when Obama couldn't fulfill all of those judgeships and Trump just got to do all of that? Biden's almost matched it. The 2022 non-red wave, I'm not fucking with you, saved us. So there is a chance and blocks to a lot of that stuff. Okay? All right. Bad news first. Give me a second to explain all of this because it's going to be heavy, and then I will give you some good news, all right? And it's good news that's not just public pressure, okay? Like, I promise you, I got you some other stuff. Number one, immigration. Trump is very keen, promising that no price tag exists on his mass deportation plans to round up and deport 23 million illegal immigrants. There are not 23 million illegal immigrants. There are more like 11. Him and his cronies have floated the idea of deporting citizens and stripping them of their citizenship, even birthright citizenship, and vowed to mobilize ICE immediately. This also includes deportation camps, which is fascistic and horrific. Number two, abortion. Project 2025 has vowed a backdoor abortion ban, subverting Congress to ban abortion nationally using the Comstock Act. That's an old fucking law that would be used to prosecute and make illegal to distribute materials used to perform abortions or abortion medication across the country. Trump has promised to open libel laws, jail his political opponents, prosecute media critics, and revoke licenses for opposition networks. He has floated once again the idea of dismantling Section 230. If you don't know what Section 230 is, it is the provision that does not hold media companies responsible for content that they upload to the internet on YouTube and everything like that. Repealing Section 230, right, would dramatically change the entire nature of the internet and introduce a lot of other roadblocks for what content you could actually upload to platforms. Number four, the Schedule F executive order. The Schedule F thing, which makes nonpartisan bureaucrats and civil servants at-will employees, creates many of the possibilities that you were hearing about right now. This executive order would let Donald Trump install loyalists in all these key positions in the government in order to bypass any administrative checks or roadblocks within the executive that exists to ensure Trump has an entire cadre of people that will do what he wants. This would also significantly reduce regulatory oversight in many instances and possible selective enforcement on laws that do exist for the other party, as well as the deregulation of safety standards and environmental standards. Thanks, RFK. And of course, number five, I think, tariffs, which by all means would increase the price of many different things towards the consumer and possibly tank the economy. All right, there's some more bad news. Promise I'm almost done. In terms of foreign policy, Gaza is completely fucked now, right? Netanyahu will colonize parts of Gaza. Nobody to stop him. Ukraine will be forced to capitulate somewhat to Russia by the order of both Elon and Trump, and we will either leave NATO or have a smaller standing in the world stage for the next 4 years. We're 100% leaving the Paris Climate Agreement again. And some of these are inevitable, right? There will be pressure on voting in the FEC. There will be attacks on immigration and abortion and female reproductive health and press freedoms. And in the Supreme Court, Trump will get 2 to 3 picks. So it is very bad. It's bad, okay? I just want to get that out there so you don't think that I'm huffing copium again, all right? I talked to somebody yesterday and they thought I was. I have researched this. I know how bad it is. I'm not minimizing it. I understand. It is devastating and dangerous, okay? Good news. Number one, immigration. Donald Trump, once again, does not have the votes, even if he nuked the fucking filibuster, to actually strip birthright citizenship or even gained citizenship because it is a constitutional amendment. In order to do that, you need 2/3 of each chamber and 3/4, like I said, you remember 38 state legislatures for ratification power in order to make that happen. They don't have anywhere near that shit. 47-53 Senate is not that, and the House is going to be mad divided. It's close, guys. And before you go, well, they'll just ignore them. That's not how any of this works, right? It's not up to Congress or ICE to ignore that. All of the power in the United States is decentralized. That process takes a long fucking time. In between them trying to take on this massive operation that is going to be incredibly difficult and is already being questioned and walked back in the press, there will be dozens of bad news articles, economic consequences, and damage to Trump's allies and billionaire friends, who I'm just going to remind you are required for him to maintain power everywhere. That would significantly mitigate some of their implementation of this. Now, what about wrongful deportation? What if they just take people wrongfully and deport them? So listen, I looked this up, and it's not only in the Trump administration. We'll talk about other administrations later, but when that has happened, where there's been a trifecta, even other 6-3 Supreme Court loyalist majorities have ruled in favor of those deported. And looking at the records of Trump's Supreme Court majorities, they would probably do the same. Let's say you don't believe any of that. Fine. There are multiple legal rights groups, including the ACLU, that are far more prepared and are signaling that in the press to issue legal challenges, and Trump does not have the vacancies in the judiciary that he had when Obama left office and McConnell just let him pack that motherfucker. Don't wave that off. Again, that isn't nothing. Biden has caught up in terms of judicial appointments. He's 30 away. Issuing legal challenges like that on that system could cause severe gridlock on Trump's plans. And also, that no price tag is a lofty fucking goal, my guy. Do people not remember the wall? Right? Do you know that there was a version of that campaign for the wall since 2005, right? He stole that fucking idea. And I also think people underestimate when they talk about the adults no longer being in the room, just how many loyalists Trump had in his first administration. Okay? A lot of people bent the knee, and the wall still didn't fucking happen because it costs so much. The amount of money that will cost to other sectors of society that would feel it, including conservative sectors that are currently in power. The reason the people who are elected love Trump is because they benefit from him. Again, that doesn't include any of the legal challenges that I mentioned, which would slow it the fuck down and make it cost more money. And say what you will about Donald Trump, about him being a strongman, about him being fascistic, which he is. He is also incredibly operationally inefficient. I'm not super operationally inefficient. Even in his campaign, right? His ground game operation was as terrible as Harris's campaign was ineffective. And again, that does not mean his immigration policy will not be bad and horrific and incredibly inhumane. But there are tools and agencies and organizations not related to Trump's government, which he can install himself, that can substantially slow it down or fight it. Very quickly, before we move on, I do want to talk a little bit about data privacy. Over the past year, it's become increasingly apparent how your privacy is not a guaranteed thing on this version of the internet we appear to be on. Whether it's spam calls, election calls from whenever we had to deal with that, the social media we use, the apps we buy into, all of it feels very, very shaky. It should not come as a shock that there is a giant industry built around the data gathered from violating your privacy, sometimes without your consent, and selling it to the highest bidder. This has been one of the most frustrating things for me, especially in the election year we just had. It's something I've been deeply worried about, but a lot of that worry has subsided over the last year, thanks to the sponsor of today's show, Incogni. Look, very simply put, getting the data that results in spam calls and the company's abilities to track and target you off of their databases is a large, overcomplicated process that Incogni takes care of for you. It is the set it and forget it solution that will literally contact every one of these data brokers, find where your data is in the first place, and make sure it's taken down, go through whatever legalese and loopholes and bullshit they give you, so you can finally be in control of your privacy again. And there are tangible effects to this, whether it's less spam calls, whether it's a greater peace of mind when you're signing up for an app and know that your data isn't going to be traded over the internet like that. Incogni is the easiest solution and an incredibly efficient solution to all of it. I pay for Incogni out of my pocket. I don't have a free subscription. I am paying monthly because I believe in it so much. And Incogni keeps track of every data broker they've issued a request to and where it is in the process. This is my request when I started Incogni. This is where it is now. I started with an email that was flooded with so much spam and problems, and I would get spam calls all the time. And I can tell you, I've seen a remarkable difference since I started with Incogni. That email is literally usable again. Look, and if you go to incogni.com/Tabani and enter in the code Tabani, you can get 60% off an Incogni plan today. 60% off? Wow, that was my sanity watching the election this year. Fucking A. Listen, I truly do believe in this thing, and I think it is incredibly helpful, especially in years like this one or any other years we may have, dealing with a world that just does not respect our privacy and our data. So listen, if you are tired of the spam calls and spam emails, if you want a little bit more calm when you're trying to sign up for an app and not think that everything is going to be just taken and sold from you, and if you want to support this cool rap news show in this brave new world, go to incogni.com/Tabani, enter in the code Tabani, and get some peace of mind. All right, back to the breakdown. Number 2, abortion. First off, even post the red wave that just occurred this year, most experts are still unsure if Trump could get a national abortion ban through Congress without significant hurdles. The Republican House is divided at best, like I just told you, and will be up against it come 2026. And that map for both the House and the Senate could be in significant danger, as Democrats would only have to flip a few seats to block legislation entirely. In terms of the Comstock Act, that thing that they would use to prosecute any abortion materials sent over states and all that kind of stuff, and abortion medication, obviously, like I said before, legal challenges could be implemented, slowing down the process of them implementing the Comstock Act, including, and I am not fucking with you, using the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, as the basis of saying, actually, according to Dobbs, it's up to the states themselves. That's right. They can use the Dobbs decision to fight against the Comstock Act in court. And that is a big deal, because if you look into how consistent the Supreme Court judges are with their own philosophy versus their partisanship, which I did to all of them, fuck these people. Only 2 judges have outright said, or in some way, shape, or form signaled, that they specifically favor a national abortion ban. All 3 Trump judges have specifically stated in opinions or even hinted at in their prior appointments it should specifically be a states' rights issue and have ruled as such. Even Kavanaugh, when he was shotgunning beers with Tobin and his calendars. And listen, very quickly, just diverting from the script a little bit, like, I really did look up all of these Supreme Court justices and looked through their cases and was saying, like, when do they differ from their originalist interpretation of when they should do a case? Like, when do they bend that to partisanly help the Republican Party? And I'm not kidding you, the majority of the time, they are stands for that states' rights shit, right? They so fundamentally believe it in their bones, right? These 3, to the point where even during the Trump administration, some of them defied Trump specifically because of the states' rights issue. Another challenge that would 100% make the Supreme Court wins is the First Amendment versus the Comstock Act. And the only ones who would probably rule against that are Thomas and Alito. There's a lot of tie-ups that could gridlock something like Comstock from really being effective. And in addition to that, there could also be state-level shields for distribution of abortion-related materials, ones that protect against other states. Also, in terms of the whole fetal personhood thing, it is very unlikely they even touch that because of how bad the IVF row was when it happened. Number 3. Schedule F, I'm not going to lie, is a legitimately scary problem, and a lot of Trump heads of institutions last time eroded a ton of important things. But there are some safeguards that are in place that aren't necessarily at the United States' behest. So one example that people have floated is RFK Jr. and health, right? He's said he wants to gut the FDA, although he's walked back vaccine bans, and he mentions he wants to mainly stop vaccine mandates, which is still fucking horrible, by the way. Also, I should say at the time of this, some people in the Trump campaign are starting to kind of hedge with RFK there because they think he's kind of fucking crazy. So I would not be surprised if he is the first on the chopping block this time around. But look, let's say he gets what he wants. He can't replace the EMA or the CFIA or any of those agencies. Drug manufacturers in general make a fuck ton of money internationally. There's a good chance the EMA and the CFIA are already wary of the FDA being gutted and fucking up. So in response to that, specifically because they know how chaotic Trump is, they are probably going to tighten restrictions on all stuff that gets shipped out, forcing manufacturers, if they wanted to make a product in the United States, to adhere to those European standards. And it is financially unfeasible for certain manufacturers to have different versions of their medicines with different regulatory checks, which would help block RFK from stripping all the safety protections off medications. As for nutrition, there would probably be something similar due to manufacturing in the capitalistic process. For once, capitalism might actually fucking save us. And that does not mean everything is great and rainbows, okay? There will be a lot of shiesty off-brand assholes who make a version of Tylenol that will give you a third eye. But with enough resources to identify those shiesty motherfuckers, you could mitigate that sort of damage. And again, in addition to that, now that the election high is worn off, a lot of Trump officials are kind of fucking freaking out about RFK. All right. So we'll have to see what happens. But already they're like, this guy. Also, with other Schedule F appointments, there are multiple civil protections and organizations that are like ready to file lawsuits the second it goes into effect for multiple key positions and employees. That would fundamentally slow down the implementation of the Schedule F executive order. And if you were sensing a pattern here, yes, legitimately, judicial gridlock can play a huge, powerful part in checking fascistic actions. Biden has a lot of problems, but that is something that he's left us with that will actually be helpful. And what about those tariffs? Well, a lot of companies are already signaling in the press that yes, they're going to raise prices on the consumer. It's also specifically worded in a way that I would think that it's strategic in the way they're doing it because they just don't want to deal with tariffs anyway. But whatever. They're saying, yes, the price will go up on consumers and they're going to raise it ahead of time. This is a great telegraph for a shit ton of bad press. And I will finally say it, public backlash. Also, corporate backlash, because it would hurt the bottom line of a lot of corporations and markets. Because if the consumers who voted for Trump don't understand the prices are going to go up, and then the prices go up, demand will significantly drop, and so will stock prices. And let us be honest. Outside of Trump being chained to his own self-interest is chained to the investor class and capitalists. Every time the investor class has gone on TV to defend Trump outside of his bullshit nativist rhetoric, the same thing they say all the time comes up. Oh, well, when Trump gets back into office, the markets will go up. Deregulation. They want the stock market to go up and keep flowing. If the stock market tanks, investors are like, what the fuck's happening? That upsets their priorities, and the oligarchy has a lot of money to throw to lobbying. And so look, I do assume that some tariffs will go through, but I don't know if all of them will happen, but there will be pushback, especially internationally. And you can already see signs of how companies are operating around it. And lastly, press freedoms. So first off, libel laws are administered by the state. Certain billionaires will scoff and bend the knee, but there are a lot of press operations and independent media that can challenge Trump without fear of libel due to location. Now, let's say Trump wanted to revoke CBS's license, for example. Let's say Trump Schedule F'd the FCC. There's still a prolonged process in order for all of that to happen, with legal hearings and proceedings, followed by challenges that would occur alongside widespread backlash and reporting that would ultimately make the process a net negative. It's not necessarily McCarthyism, but it is similar. And during McCarthyism, there was pushback, but less press freedoms and apparatus that we have now. It's quite a bit different with the media culture that we live in. I had to go get coffee because the battery ran out. Lastly, Section 230. That's kind of one of the biggest fears of what could happen. If you don't know, Section 230 is what governs a lot of the online content on the internet. If you repealed Section 230, it would hold companies like Google and Facebook liable for the content that's on their platforms, which would cause them to severely curtail and restrict what kind of content could be on there. More than they already do, it would be censorship at a larger scale in terms of decency. The problem with that is Section 230 is a bipartisanly supported issue between Republicans and Democrats. Trump, at a point in his first term, got all of his loyalists in place, and at that time, he threatened Section 230 and still couldn't gut it. Also, the difference is this time around,
there are repercussions to all of the ghouls who got Trump elected if Section 230 goes. That means Aiden Ross, Joe Rogan, fucking Sneeko, all of them would be affected by that gut. And that has ramifications to the Republican Party's current enormous advantage in new media, because all of these platforms are private platforms. For those private platforms, gutting an entire political party off of your platform cuts your profit exponentially. Ask Elon, because while he pushes his thumb on right-wing content on X and also removes some critics, by and large, it's in his best interest to let Democrats stay on the platform. And the more Republican it gets, the more the valuation of Twitter itself goes down and people seek alternatives. Again, Threads is at 275 million. It grew 50 fucking million in the last couple months. Google, Amazon, and Meta do not want a partisan platform. They want a bipartisan platform because the chaos breeds profit. Again, this is an allegiance to capitalism, all right? Through authoritarianism. Project 2025 is using authoritarian ideas for an allegiance to capitalism and fucking money. If their profit margin shrinks, they get upset, period. That's the guardrail. Somehow, the fucking monopoly man is our guardrail. And again, I hate I have to keep clarifying, I am not huffing copium. Yes, it will still obviously be horrific and norm changing and devastatingly problematic. I am not looking forward to that or waving it off, but I am encouraged that there are significant structural checks even before you as a citizen get involved. All right. Intent to do something doesn't mean you're good at doing it. Trump is sycophantic and insane. The majority of the reason many people swung towards him was not because of his sycophancy. They disliked that. It was a compromise for why they voted for him. That already is a problem in America, and that's something that we're going to have to dissect for a while. But the one silver lining in all of that is that the reason he is not liked is because he sucks at his fucking job. Like the Madison Square Garden rally, I don't care if it didn't really hurt his standing with Puerto Ricans. It was bad. It fucked up press coverage. Like if your job as the president is to use the bully pulpit and that's the thing you threw, it shows that you are not organizationally efficient to turn out your base. Nobody fucking went to the polls like, oh my God, the reason I voted for Trump was the Madison Square Garden rally. They did it because of the fucking economy, which I think is personally fucking stupid. But anyway, let's talk about some context. All right, so who is Trump most like right now in this situation after this election? Who is he most like? Is he most like Hitler from the 1930s? Trump from 2016? Or George Bush from 2004? I think he's George Bush from 2004. You may have already heard this, but let me explain. In 2004, John Kerry ran against an increasingly unpopular Iraq war with images of Iraqi civilian casualties everywhere, huge attacks on gay rights and homophobia, a middling economy, and an increasing push of right-wing patriotic masculinity messaging dominating the headlines. All of this was included with Bush's unitary executive policy, stating that the president in times of national crisis has broad authority to use the executive branch to its limits, which most people know is the keystone theory that led to Project 2025. If Project 2025 is Cell with both androids, Bush is Cell after 17. And I guess that would make Biden Vegeta and Trunks Kamala Harris, which this is a really good metaphor, actually. At the home stretch, the polls were about 2 to 3 points off of each other, and Kerry was running to the right, emphasizing his centrism on national security issues, touting Bill Clinton. Stop me if you've heard this before. And instead of building on that anti-war sentiment, he was also categorized by his opponents as a flip-flopper with no consistent position. Have you heard this before? Have you stopped me yet? Kerry lost to Bush for being a generic centrist, flip-flopping Democrat, losing the popular vote and giving Bush what he called a mandate and all three branches of government, including a 6-3 SCOTUS. What followed in 2005 was the fear of a constitutional amendment that would destroy gay rights and completely block the right to gay marriage. Much like the trans panic of today, gay panic was fucking everywhere. Everywhere. And in terms of authoritarianism, Bush and Republicans started pushing for something called voter ID laws, engaging in voter suppression and media intimidation of the highest order. I'm not fucking kidding. The media intimidation was fucking crazy in 2005. Most famously, the number one news source on television was Fox News. They dominated everything. There was no MySpace, bro. All right. It was Fox or bust. Fox dominated terrestrial media, consistently attacking other media outlets for a lack of patriotism and destroying America and the American family. The religious right got so much more religious, bro. Pat Robertson was like a fucking, he had so many television appearances. But were there podcasts in 2024? Bitch! There was the explosion of conservative talk radio. Conservative pro-war talk radio was so fucking analogous to all of the shit that's going on right now. You had Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck, Bill O'Reilly come up through conservative pro-war talk radio. You know how you have motherfuckers calling Harry Sisson a pussy? Harry Sisson sucks. You know this whole alpha male, beta male bullshit that you're seeing on right now? Well, you had versions of that in 2005. Hannity and Combs was one of the biggest shows on Fox News, and it featured Hannity, who looked like a fucking football player who had just retired from Remember the Titans, fighting Alan Combs, who looked like he had been stuffed in a locker during graduation and come out to join Hannity to possibly get stuffed in a locker later. So many people commented about how Alan Combs looked very frail when he represented the Democratic side, and Hannity looked like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to throw a football and, be terrible at everything else. And then when it came to elections and politics, you had celebrities like Michael Moore, Sean Penn, Rob Reiner, Susan Sarandon, who were shit on and called Hollywood elites. They're so out of touch with real America. Real America doesn't need these Hollywood elites. They even got Jane Fonda and called her Hanoi Jane for her opposition to the Iraq War. Oh, how history repeats. And you want to talk about a masculinity problem? Motherfucker, you had a billion soldiers movies. Do you know how many soldier movies came out in the fucking mid-2000s? So many fucking soldier movies, right? We Were Soldiers, Jarhead, Flyboys, Pearl Harbor, Team America, that's kind of like soldiers, Flags of Our Fathers, Heart's War, Black Hawk Down, Bruce Willis, Mel Gibson, Clint Eastwood. Motherfucker, that shit was everywhere. Are you a gruff man's man? Old ways are the best ways, am I right? And amongst all of that masculinity messaging propaganda, the fear of erosion of democratic norms, and many people worried George Bush would undo democracy as a king with voter suppression and institute one-party rule, Democrats swept the Senate and the House and blocked the Bush administration's priorities as soon as they came in 2006. They started oversight hearings. They blocked appointments. Nancy Pelosi was a fucking gangster against George W. Bush. And Harry Reid ran something called the Reid Machine, an incredible organization of voter turnout. You can see some of it because Jackie Rosen just won her fucking Senate seat in Nevada amidst a red wave. And 2 years later, after the Democrats swept the 2006 midterms, Obama came in 2008 and swept the House, the Senate, and the presidency with supermajorities. Now listen, Trump is worse than Bush. I'm not going to pretend that that's anything different. Trump is worse than Bush, but he is also more disorganized, less cunning than Dick Cheney. By the way, never again. Never again. Fuck that guy. Even still, a lot of these things were tried with less protections. I will also admit, though, Project 2025 is way worse than Bush's unitary executive. It's more far-reaching in scope. It's far more aggressive and draconian and fascistic than Bush's unitary executive ever was. But it also didn't have a 4-year firewall that hired judges, re-emphasized democratic norms, and pissed off the media like they currently are pissed off. Because trust me, amidst all of the why did Democrats lose, they're upset. All of the normalizing you think they do to Trump is not nearly as bad as the normalizing they did in the Bush administration. Okay? Casual Islamophobia. Like worse than it is now. Way worse than it is now. All right? We're not Germany. Germany elected Hitler chancellor, and he arguably had more power over all agencies to decimate every single freedom and norm. Power was centralized. But Trump has to deal with the cadaver of state legislatures and other independently gridlocked positions like the judiciary that slow his momentum down and block it. He also has to deal with the oligarchy, which is worried about their bottom fucking line. Now, if he expands his majorities in 2026, if he takes over state legislatures in 2026, maybe yes, that can happen. But a few very big pieces of momentum against Trump. Number one, he already became the most unpopular president in history within a month last time. There are already reports of buyer's remorse amongst some voters. And again, he won the popular vote, but the last Republican to do that ended with a -23 approval rating before the midterms. Also, the 2006 midterms were reactionary. In order for Bush to not have that happen, he would have had to be a moderate. They were in specific reaction to Bush's escalation of the Iraq War. All of Trump's policies genuinely are unpopular when he's sycophantic. So the more fascistic and sycophantic he gets, that does cut against the public and will lower his approval rating. Historically, it's been seen to do that. Also, I don't know why I have to bring this up. He's the second president to get elected in 2 non-consecutive terms, like Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland, when he came back into office, tanked. Like, he destroyed his legacy. And it was because people were like, this is the same shit. This fucking guy, he's the same shit, motherfucker. What are we doing? That was Grover Cleveland. Trump would have to be a fundamentally different president and not who we thought who he was for us to really be scared. This would be a reactionary confirmation that would flip seats. This is not over. The only way this is over is if you think all dissent and pushback is. There are several tributaries that Trump still relies on, similar to Nixon and similar to Bush. And the Democrats have an incredibly strong bench. AOC, Pete Buttigieg, Jasmine Walker, J.B. Pritzker, Michelle Obama. If Michelle Obama ran, she would sweep. All of those could easily be your 2028 hope and change agent. But again, as much as there is hope, a lot of people are scared of the current damage and what will occur. And there will be damage. There will be friends who are deported for no fucking reason. There will be women who bleed out because of the callousness of this fucking bitch Nick Fuentes. And there will be unfair implementation of campaign laws and media restrictions. But those happened to actually similar degrees in 2005. Actually, a little bit more from what we're expecting. And there were proven ways and blocks around these things. So what can you do if you are worried about voting? Most of those restrictions can be overcome with grassroots organizing early. It will probably be voter ID laws. It will probably be other things that purge voter rolls. If you can inform and create organizational grassroots movements to try to get voters registered and to the polls and circumvent a lot of these laws that make things inconvenient, you can feasibly fight those laws. That's what happened in 2006. There wasn't enough intimidation and tactics and gerrymandering to fuck them getting voted out. If you are worried about immigration, distributing mutual aid or protecting the status of the people you know is your best bet. If you know someone undocumented, don't say a word. Don't mention it on text. Download apps like Signal, which are end-to-end encryption, and do what you can to hide anything ICE would try to track. I would say find sanctuary cities like California to help people with their undocumented status make their way there so ICE has less of an ability to hurt them. To that extent, certain governors like Gavin Newsom in California, J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, many Democratic governors have signaled they are not going to let the Trump administration overreach and hurt their state's rights to protect their citizenry. These legal challenges, like I said earlier, would probably be upheld by the Supreme Court, even with Trump appointees. I know that sounds insane because they're partisan, but they're partisan in a very specific way. That's their line. In terms of disability benefits and health restrictions, GoFundMes are going to be everywhere. And mutual aid is going to be a lot of this. Fundraisers can become the cultural norm and should, similar to 2005. We should have consistent fundraisers for people who are less fortunate and need help to get by in the face of all of this shit. In terms of abortion and reproductive health, again, organizing aid and organizations that can discreetly help women travel to states where they can receive care safely will be key. Also, if you live in a state that has outlawed abortion like Texas, erase your period app. Use encrypted messaging. All of that will be key. Take care of the women in your life and make a lot of noise so it's hard for people in Texas around to hurt them. This will be harder than anything else. You will not be able to save everybody, but you can save a number of people who are close to you and battle a draconian system. Same with trans people. Help shield your trans friends and don't let motherfuckers start shit. In terms of the rampant misogyny and attacks on women from people like Nick Fuentes and Aiden Ross, let's be pretty clear. We fucked up. Like in 2004, liberals did not push against the advent of talk radio the same way conservative media pushed. They didn't have the apparatus that Fox did in terms of the news media. Most of the time, they were leaning only on empathy and gentle doves and theory and philosophy and got labeled as pussies or offended by everything. That was like a big talking point. And that is, to some extent, propaganda. But after 2004, a lot of that changed. Jon Stewart ate Tucker Carlson's fucking lunch and stuffed them in a locker and destroyed his opportunities. And then, after the election, started talking a lot more shit. He started debating more, not caring who got mad. The Colbert Report came on, and the Colbert Report was a giant fuck you to Bill O'Reilly. Even if he played nice, he would go on every time and make fun of all of this apparatus. You had a bunch of counterweights to this macho class of comedian, people like Louis Black and Dave Chappelle, Robin Williams, George Carlin. This fuck you counterculture energy, even as much as I don't like him, Bill Maher played a huge role in dismantling a lot of the Bush apparatus of like religious fundamentalism. We need that energy. We need alternative media that's not just like, welcome to Pod Save America. My name is Thomas. No. We need that. Fuck these people. They suck. We need that kind of energy. We have positive masculine figures that aren't shitty to women. And we have anti-Ben Shapiro's that aren't Harry Sisson. Maybe I'm one of them. Maybe you're one of them. Make content. Talk shit. Speak up. We have had a 4-year firewall to figure this out. That's the difference between now and 2004. Our platforms and media savvy are so much better. Don't get offended by Ben Shapiro and these anti-trans idiots. Clown these motherfuckers. Present an alternative that promotes all the values he's hypocritical about. Make content about being good at business and successful that doesn't require you to be a fucking conservative dipshit. Great example is John Cena. He promotes masculinity, which emphasizes respect and still being a badass. And if you're worried about media becoming less diverse, don't. There was a lot of pushback in the Bush administration and decency culture wars against things like rap music and comedy and everything that looked remotely gay. If shit makes money, corporations will make it. Okay? And if they challenge it, there will be 100 lawsuits because everybody still wants to make fucking money. There are distinct ways history is telling you to fight this, and do not get it twisted. Again, Trump is an existential threat to democracy. This is the furthest right-wing push and sycophancy we have ever seen, and it will erode many democratic norms and the rights of other people and groups. But it is beatable and reversible. Do you understand? Everybody has been afraid for this last year. And I know it could feel like, oh, okay, so then was that election just fear-mongering? It wasn't really. This is bad. We are just kind of lucky. Again, 2022 saved us. And we have counterweights and a playbook to a lot of the things that conservatives are already pushing out there. Ben Shapiro's fucking boring. I am so sorry. Like, I know he has a lot of money and a big apparatus, but his shit's boring, guys. Okay? PragerU's fucking trash. It's boring. The media has had so many years with Tucker. He's fucking wet paper towel. You have a plethora of content that wants to be edgy and fun. Let's have fun. Let's be edgy and show these people they suck. It starts now. And anybody saying, oh, it's not that bad or you will die in a gulag, neither is really true. It is bad. You're not in a gulag. It's not about Gaza. It's not about turnout. Do not listen to pundits. They don't know anything. They know nothing. You're here. Fuck these people. Let's work. You've seen me genuinely afraid, and I am genuinely afraid to some extent. But I have fought this before. This was a defining point in my life. And the one thing that brought me any solace was every single time I looked up anything from the share of Hispanic voters to the share of young people to any of the other metrics that shifted right in 2024 and comparing it and seeing how almost exactly it shifted in 2004, all of a sudden I knew where we are. All of a sudden I know how to fight this. I have experience. And that experience tells me, get to work. Do not fucking panic. The less you panic, the less you blame something, the more they get scared. So get to work. That's our show. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you saw, catch me in the wrap next Sunday. I'll also start dropping good news and Griff Watch because we need some good news, right? Anyway, my name is Zaid Tabani. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all soon. Let's go!